guitar, I would like to start with this image that was painted by my mother because it tells the story of my birth. It was the fall of the year 1952, and my mom was very pregnant with me, her third child. I was quite overdue, so Mom went to the doctor who wanted to induce her right away. But Mom said she had a big tub of tomatoes sitting at home that needed to be canned. So she went home, she canned the tomatoes, she went back up to the hospital and was induced, and I finally made my entrance into the world. I teased my mom so much about making me wait until the tomatoes were canned that she painted this image for me. Oh, wrong way. I was born one of 6 children in the very small prairie town of Prelate, Saskatchewan, population 400 people. There wasn't much there, we didn't even have running water, but it was kind of a great place to grow up. It was a very strict German Catholic community, and we were safe and well cared for and well loved, and we learned how to create. I loved art from a very early age, and this is probably my very first oil painting. My parents really encouraged me, as did my teachers, most of whom were Catholic nuns. They were strict, but they appreciated art. Probably the most traumatic thing that happened to me in my youth was that I developed scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, and had to have spinal surgery and wear a body cast for an entire year. I wasn't bedridden, I was awkwardly mobile, but I couldn't wear normal clothes. So for my entire grade 10 year, I wore housecoats to school. I graduated from high school, moved to Lethbridge, Alberta to go to university. And on practically the first day there, I met this handsome immigrant from Holland with a thick Dutch accent. And we married several years later and had 2 beautiful children. I took a BFA in printmaking from the university and majored in silkscreen printing. And for about the next 15 years, I did a series of prairie landscapes and silkscreening. I loved the light and the subtle colors of the prairies, the horizon line, the open spaces, and the big sky. I had some success with this series of work, and my silkscreens are in a number of permanent, private, and public collections throughout the province. At the same time, I went back to university and received a degree in art education and taught a high school art program for the next 25 years. A number of years ago, I took these silkscreen prints and I used them as a backdrop for a series of collages. It was a great teaching job that I had, and with wonderful colleagues. One year, the fine arts teachers and I decided that we were going to put on an annual musical theater production. Because I was the art teacher, I was naturally nominated to be the designer for the show. I had no idea what I was doing, but I loved it. And I became really hooked on theater design. I loved it so much that a couple years later, I asked for a leave of absence for my teaching job and went up to the University of Alberta in Edmonton and took an MFA in theater design. And probably for about the next 20 years, I designed set costumes and lights for as many theater productions as I could. And then life fell apart. It was 2004, the 3rd Monday of January, when I came home from school and found that my husband had taken his life. His suicide literally brought me to my knees. It was the most painful 2 years, or number of years that I have ever experienced. And yet through the grief, I felt that the universe was surrounding me with love from my children, from family, and from friends. And things started to shift and things started to change. I covered the walls of my studio with huge rolls of paper, and I spent hours and years just drawing. In a couple of years, I retired from my teaching job, and I invited my elderly mother to come live with me. At the same time, I ran a volunteer art program at the local homeless shelter. The very elderly and the very destitute also taught me a great deal. As well, I illustrated 3 children's books that a colleague had written for and about the Native children that lived on the Blackfoot Reserve west of Lethbridge. In total, there were 71 acrylic paintings that I did for these books, and I then donated the paintings to the elementary school out on the reserve. Today, these books are in every elementary school and library in southern Alberta and in every foster home in the province of Alberta. The project was approved by the superintendent of schools for the Kainai Reserve, and he did all the Blackfoot vocabulary that is in the books. For fun, I went backpacking. A group of female friends and I hiked the West Coast Trail. We hiked the Choku Trail, the Grand Canyon, and a number of us went on a longer trek to the base camp of Mount Everest in Nepal. We had some grand adventures. And then life changed again when my daughter asked me to come and help her with her new baby girl. They lived in North Vancouver, but she had just gotten a good job offer in Barrie, Ontario. I had to look up on the map where Barrie, Ontario was, but I sold my home in Lethbridge and I moved with them to Ontario. It was an interesting 2 years. I didn't know a soul, so I thought that this would be an excellent opportunity to really focus on my artistic practice again. I went to every figure drawing session that I possibly could, even driving into Toronto 2 or 3 times a week to go to different figure drawing sessions. I even took classical drawing instructions, which, truth be told, I found really painful. I'm not very detailed and I'm not very clean. The image on the top right of the foot took me probably 36 hours of instruction time and cost me $250 in instruction fees. And on the last day when I was finishing it, the easel that I was working on had some oil paint on it, which I didn't notice, and I smudged oil paint across the drawing, just when I was finishing it. I did love doing portrait work on large pieces of paper, and I love working in charcoal and Conte, which is just a little bit messier. As well, I took up oil painting again, which I hadn't done in a long time, and I was doing portraiture and figurative work that I had been exploring within my drawing practice. I really struggled though. I struggled with technique, I struggled with style, I struggled with what did I want to say and how did I want to say it. But within 2 years, my daughter and her husband decided to move back to Vancouver, and in the summer of 2016, I made the move with them. At that time, I was working on a series of portraits in pastel, Conte, and gouache on pre-activated ground. I would take posters or maps, adhere it to heavy watercolor paper, cover it with a coating of clear gesso, and then with a coating of gouache as well. The drawing would then be done onto the coating of gouache, and then some areas of the gouache would be washed away to reveal some of the poster underneath. I really like doing this process. I was doing pictures of family and friends. That's my daughter and her baby girl in the middle, and my elderly mother on the top right. And my 2 granddaughters, who were my muses in the bottom, middle of the bottom. At that time, I had rented a small studio space at the Beaumont and had the really good fortune to meet Amy and Erica, who told me about a group called THRIVE and a consultant named Penny Lane. I immediately checked them out, joined THRIVE, and had my first consult with Penny Lane. And then my art practice really started to change. I moved studios to my current space on Franklin Street and started working on Mylar, figurative work on Mylar. And these are done with walnut ink on Mylar, walnut ink and graphite, and in this particular series with enamel paint as well. I still struggled though, wanting to go, what do I really want to say with my figurative work? And then last summer, 2 things happened. A friend gave me a box of very vintage magazines, some of them dating back to 1913. And my elderly mother ended up in the hospital, and we thought that she was near death. As I sat by her bedside, I was particularly struck with the translucency of her skin, how thin it was on her face and on her hands. She almost seemed to glow from within, and I knew I had to do something with that, and I started my series in praise of older women. I started layering the Mylar that I was working with, putting the magazine transfers onto the back of the Mylar. And then most recently, I started painting a double image where I would paint an image of a rose or a faded flower on terraskin or more recently on birch paneling, and then do the figure on the very thin and very translucent Mylar on top and layer one of those images on top of the other. So you can kind of see the process here, the faded roses in the background, and then the image of the woman, and then the 2 of them combined. I was very challenged in finding models. A lot of women that age aren't particularly keen about posing at that light. I had a lot of women who were interested in having me take their portrait and even baring their shoulders, but not too many of them wanted to actually pose in the nude. So I went to the internet. And there are some sites on the internet for figure drawers where you could go and you could look up figure drawing and you could have a lot of different poses, and they're really pretty normal. And none of them were of older women. You probably can imagine what happened when I typed in nude older women into Google Images. So it was quite a dilemma. I went to my mastermind group and explained my dilemma, and word spread, and within a short while, I had a number of older women in the area contact me and offered to be a model for my series. This lovely woman, Karen, came to my studio, and I had great fun experimenting with projecting different flowers and roses onto her body. So the idea now is to instead of just painting a rose or a flower in the background, but to actually paint the figure with the rose or the flower following the contour or the form of the body, and then doing a very translucent image on top, like still in walnut ink on the mylar. I'm very committed to doing a series on older women. I find that the faded flower is very symbolic of the loosening of the skin as we age, but then translucency and the double image seems to, in my mind, really portray the resiliency and the spirit of older women that many older women have. I have been in my life surrounded by very strong older women, my mother, my sisters, my many good friends, and I feel that there is really a substance there that I would like to portray. So I feel like I finally have found the why I'm doing what I'm doing. Whoops. The image that I showed you at the beginning of the canned tomatoes, my mother was 91 when she painted that image. Mom died just a few weeks ago at 96, and she was a remarkable example of a woman who loved to create all of her life. I'm now 65, and I feel like I'm just hitting my stride as an artist. They say that all of your art is a self-portrait. Well, I have been a printmaker and a theater designer and an art educator and a figurative artist, as well as a whole host of roles in my private life, right? And I feel I'm just very excited about the possibilities of what the future holds for me and the kind of art that I will do, for I feel that my best art is yet to come. And I'd love to end with this quote. It's an excerpt from a poem by Rupi Kaur. And it says, "For I have just gotten started. I feel as though I just left the womb. My 20s are the warm-up for what I'm really about to do. Wait till you see me in my 30s. Now that will be a proper introduction to the nasty, wild woman in me. How can I leave before the party started? Rehearsals begin at 40. I ripen with age. I do not come with an expiration date. And now for the main event. Curtains up at 50. Let's begin the show. Thank you very much."